Today I'm going to show you one of the most dangerous monsters in Dungeons & Dragons. This is a creature that will utterly annihilate any hero, a monstrous titan that can devour entire adventuring parties in seconds. A terror of such profound might, empires quake and kingdoms fall at their arrival. A beast that you've probably seen many times and thought nothing of it. I am of course talking about the common Earthworm. At least, that's how their life begins. The Fiendwurm is a monster from the pages of D&D 3rd edition's Monster Manual 2, and this thing is horrific. Every Fiendwurm begins life as a humble earthworm, crawling in the dirt, doing its thing. That is until it's plucked from the ground by someone with malicious intent. The someone in question might be a literal demon, a cultist in service of a demonic entity from the abyss, or simply just an overzealous wizard who wants to do a cool science experiment. But regardless of who is responsible, for one reason or another, the Earthworm is exposed to abyssal magic that over time causes it to grow and mutate into something awful. There's no information on just how long this process takes, but I like to imagine it probably takes months of constant exposure to demonic magic to transform a little earthworm into a gargantuan monstrosity like this, though I suppose it's also possible that it all happens at once through some kind of grand ritual or something. But whatever the case, once the Fiendwurm has completed this transformation, it becomes a hellish monstrosity of titanic scale with some very fun abilities the DM can employ. Fiendwurms are gargantuan creatures, meaning that on a grid in D&D, they occupy a 4x4 area at a minimum, but gargantuan creatures can kind of be as big as the DM wants them to be, and the Fiendwurm in its native edition of the game is a colossal creature, which is a size category that doesn't exist anymore, but for reference, most colossal creatures occupy a 30-foot space, which would be a 6x6 area on your standard D&D map. And that is fucking massive. Clocking in at nearly 70 feet long, the Fiendwurm is a terrifying sight to behold. While technically a monstrosity and not a demon, they are created by demons, which means, you know, this creature's having a bad time. Fiendwurms are in constant agony due to their transformation, and the reason for that is because the magic that gives rise to a Fiendwurm also creates a portal big enough for a giant to pass through inside the creature's body. Anything devoured by this creature is inevitably pushed through the portal and finds itself somewhere in the infinite layers of the abyss. Consuming meat, whether alive or dead, does quell the pain caused by the portal for a short time, so as you can imagine, the Fiendwurm is constantly trying to devour anything and everyone it can. Getting consumed by a Fiendwurm is definitely a bad time. Gotta be in my bottom 1 ways to go. But the only thing worse than death in the belly of a gargantuan worm might be, I don't know, getting tossed into the abyss. Speaking of the abyss, the fun thing about this portal is that it is actually bi-directional, meaning that the creature in the abyss can also pass through the portal and emerge inside the Fiendwurm. Because of this, Fiendwurms are often used by demonic forces as living siege engines who are set loose on major cities on the material plane. The worm can crash through city walls with ease, wreaking havoc as it thrashes around, flattening buildings and slaying the city's defenders, only to then start retching out these legions of demonic soldiers into the city who immediately begin to terrorize their surroundings. In such cases, even when the worm is slain, it has essentially served its purpose, ideally allowing enough demons to get through that they can finish the job and maybe even start erecting a more stable portal once the city's been taken. It's also worth noting that due to the unstable nature of the portal inside the worm, since its life force is what sustains the portal, when it dies, the portal implodes. This doesn't actually cause any damage, but it does destroy the Fiendwurm's body and drag anything within 5 feet of the corpse into the portal, shunting whatever was in or around it into the abyss. And given how this creature's body is so large, that's like a 40-foot area or more that just gets dragged into one of the most dangerous planes in the existence of the multiverse. But that's all just scratching the surface of this awesome creature. I had a great time converting it into 5e, and I think it's going to be a very useful tool for a lot of DMs out there. But before I get into the specifics of how it works, I gotta give a big ol' shout out to Mage Hand Press and their latest project, Dark Matter. Dark Matter is over 440 pages of sci-fi goodness for anyone who wants to run epic adventures in space. It uses the updated 5e rules, so if you're already familiar with D&D, the general flow of the game and core classes should be familiar, but with tons of new monsters, player species options, 46 subclasses, equipment, one entirely new class, and so much other awesome stuff for entering the final frontier. They're also introducing rules and player options for ship combat and battle mechs, which is sick. Along with the main book, they've also got the Mega Box, which includes 2 full-length hardcover campaigns designed specifically for dark matter. The Kickstarter goes live on February 3rd, but the page is live right now, so you can head on over using the link in the description down below and make sure you save it to get notified. And if you are watching this in the future and it's after February 3rd, check out that link and go take a look for yourself. The folks at Mage Hand Press have been making extremely dope 5e content for a while now, and this is definitely something you're not going to want to miss, if you're a sci-fi fantasy enjoyer like myself especially. So once again, thank you so much to Mage Hand Press and Dark Matter for bringing us here this week to talk about giant earthworms. Speaking of, what do we think happens when you get swallowed by the gargantuan demon snake? Well, it sucks a lot. The worm does need to hit with its bite attack first in order to grapple a creature, which has a devastating escape DC of 26, but once it's got a hold on the target, it can then swallow them, which immediately causes the target to take a bunch more piercing damage. But that's just the beginning. Once the creature is inside the belly of the beast, it is restrained and obviously having a terrible time. At the start of the swallowed creature's turn, it is going to take some acid damage on account of the acid pooling all around them, attempting to digest their flesh and bones, and they gotta make a dexterity saving throw to avoid being thrown through the portal in the worm's guts. Keeping in mind that since they're restrained, that save is made at disadvantage on account of the creature's physiology attempting to force you down towards the abyssal gateway, which fortunately does give off some light, so at least you're not blinded. But assuming you are still alive and you didn't get sent to super hell, if you're able to do a bunch of damage to the worm from inside of it, you might be able to force it to barf you back out. Another fun detail about the Fiendwurm is that its body is slimy, like an earthworm, but rather than just being some kind of gross mucus you wipe on your jeans after baiting a fish hook, the mucus created by a Fiendwurm is highly acidic. Anyone who touches it or hits it in melee is going to take a chunk of acid damage. I mean, this thing is a CR25 creature, so it's going to be very difficult to take down, but a big part of what makes it so deadly is that innate ability to just summon more demons. 3 times per day, it can use Demonic Belch as a bonus action or a legendary action and expel 1d4 demons into a space within 5 feet of it. To determine which demons it summons, you roll a percentile and end up with either a swarm of dretches, a group of quasits, or some vrox. Quasits are only CR1, but they can be annoying as hell to deal with because of their invisibility. The dretches are CR4, which can be a pain in the ass because of their stench aura, and the vrox, well, vrox are a flying CR6 demon, so that's just a bad time all around. Now, as the DM, you can kind of just choose what comes out if you want. Like, if your party's really struggling during the encounter and you want to take it easy on them, just have a few quasits running around. And conversely, if they're doing really well and you want to up the stakes by increasing the danger, you can have a group of vrox emerge and start laying waste. And hell, if you want to have any other demon come out, you absolutely can. The random roll and 3 times per day thing in the stat block is just assuming that the portal on the other side isn't being actively monitored or used, and the worm is just barfing up whatever demons happen to wander through it. But if the worm is being used by a demonic force, not only does that 3 times per day stipulation not really apply, anything on the other side of the portal can just pass through, as long as they're not also gargantuan. Maybe a Merilith and her demonic host of soldiers emerge from the creature. Or hell, maybe a Baylor claws its way out of the thing. I think the only thing that might make a Baylor encounter more harrowing is to have it climb out of a giant purple demon worm. Talk about making an entrance. But that kind of gets more into the ways that you might use a creature like this, which I am fully prepared to talk about because holy shit. A Fiendwurm can obviously be just a random encounter for a high-level party. Maybe the thing is running rampant through the mountains somewhere, not doing anything in particular, because it's always possible that it devoured the cult who created it and is now just kinda here. I mean, maybe the cultists wanted to be devoured and used the worm as a way to get to the abyss. I can't help but feel like casting Plane Shift would have been easier, but that's also a 7th level spell, and maybe the rituals involved to create a Fiendwurm aren't as demanding if you got enough sacrifices. The Fiendwurm can also be a great set piece or consequence to be avoided. Your group of level 6 heroes ain't gonna be fighting this thing anytime soon, but maybe they're trying to stop a cult from summoning one in the first place. They could find cultists who seem to be doing bizarre rituals with earthworms of all things, and by following that trail, they ultimately discover what the cultists are hoping to achieve. In such circumstances, the Fiendwurm is kind of more of a fail state than an actual monster to be fought. If they manage to stop the cult, amazing, they did it. But if they blow it, the Fiendwurm project comes to fruition and begins making its way to the nearest city. They can't really be expected to fight it, but maybe they can go get to the city and try to help them fight back the incoming demonic armies that are about to be belched from the worm's guts. That could also be a great way to kick off a demonic siege. Imagine standing on the battlements of a castle only to see 1 or 2 of these things charging towards the walls head on. I mean, they do also have a burrow speed, so they might not even smash the walls down. They could just go through the earth and emerge in the castle courtyard, then open wide to allow hundreds of demons passage from the abyss into the kingdom. In this case, they might be more like an objective to be stopped. Rather than doing a ton of hit point damage to the worm, the party's gotta find a way to stop it from what it's doing. Maybe they pin its mouth shut with a ballista bolt fired from the castle walls, or maybe they go inside of it and dispel the portal so that it can no longer function. You can even run the inside of the worm like a dungeon, with different chambers being rooms in its digestive system. Plus, it's a weird demon worm, so you can always make up your own organs and physiology and other stuff that would make for cool rooms for adventurers to fight their way through. Maybe you've even got some lesser demons living inside of it, like parasites that come to attack the party as they try to press onwards. This creature is also a great way to get your players into the abyss if that's where the next big part of your campaign is headed. Running a game where the premise is that an entire village got devastated by this thing, and the players are all people who survived long enough to get pushed through the portal and now find themselves standing in the abyss amid the wreckage of their home, could be really cool. Maybe they're the sole survivors, or maybe they are with some other villagers and now their primary goal is just to get back to the material plane. Or maybe the players actually wanted to go to the abyss, so they sought out the Fiendwurm since it houses the only known portal in the region that could take them there, and they're basically gonna try and get themselves eaten as a means to travel the planes. Ultimately, I think this creature is extremely cool and can offer a lot to any DM doing anything even remotely related to the abyss and the demons who dwell within. And if you want to use this monster in your game, as always linked down below in the description, there is a Google document which contains all the 5e stats for this creature converted by yours truly, free of charge as always, with everything you need to run this monster successfully at your game table. And as always, if you are one of my lovely patrons, first of all, thank you so much for the extra support. I literally couldn't do this show without you. And as my way of saying thank you, over on the Dungeon Dad Patreon page, you can find the high-res PDF version of the stat block, which is all the same game information, but has a bit more of a fanciful presentation for your DMing pleasure. Speaking of which, it's time for Patron of the Week. Thank you so much to Cody Dixon for your immense amount of support. It means the most. And thank you for watching. If you haven't checked out the Patreon before and you want to do so, head on over to the link in the description down below. And if you are subscribed at the $5 tier or above, you also get access to the zine I put out last month, which is a little adventure I made entirely from scratch. It's real artisanal D&D OSR inspired adventure zine content just for you, which you can also pre-order a physical copy of on my merch store, which is linked down there as well if you want one, along with some t-shirts and other stuff. But if you're a $5 subscriber or higher, you just get it for free, at least the PDF version, so you can check it out and decide if you want the physical one. Or maybe you just want to use the digital one. That's fine too. Whatever the case, thank you once again so much for watching. And if there's a monster from an older edition of D&D, some other RPG, video game, I don't know, whatever, a book you like, let me know in the comments down below or in the Dungeon Dad Creature Suggestions channel over on the Dungeon Dad Discord. And who knows, you might just see it show up in a future episode of Monster of the Week. But that's all I got for you this week. I'll see you in the next one. Till then.